Last weekend, as I was driving down the interstate in Houston, I noticed, not for the first time, a billboard that claims signs, miracles, and wonders every Sunday at 11 a.m. I turned towards my wife and quipped, I didn't realize you could schedule them. But in all seriousness, how should one express such things to others? Something like a miracle or a sign. If language is how we report the world, how does one speak of their public or private experience of God? If someone who has had a religious experience able to speak authoritatively about what has been revealed to them? And if so, how are we to determine if their important revelation is legitimate? Is religious experience a type of proof of God or a justification of belief? Clearly, we have lots of questions. Join us as we wrap up our series on religious experience.
Welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I'm Taylor Jones.
Just plain old Taylor Jones. Wow. You're the spiritually transcendent. I am, oh dear, the sacrilegious. Oh no. I am the holy. No, that's bad too. I am. I'm Mr. Parsons. Parson. Aha. Yes. Welcome to episode 82, where we are going to wrap up this short series on religious experience, part 2. But before we get to all that, of course, Taylor Jones, the spiritually transcendent, how are you?
I'm here.
You are here.
I'm doing pretty good, but I feel like I said this the last time and like every time, but this is like super crunch time. I'm officially in the second to last week of the semester, or just ended it. So I have one almost full week. And it's like when all of the projects and essays are coming due. So I've been putting some serious hours in the library. Mm-hmm. And like late too, because I get out of class in the mid-afternoon. So I come home, eat dinner, and then go back to the library. So we're making it. Yeah, we're persisting. Taylor Swift released a new album.
So we will get to that in a moment. Yes. How late is your library open?
There's some parts of it that are open 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
I do not go to the library that late. I think I've left usually about 11 at the latest, like 10 to 11. Because at that point, I start to hit a wall and I'm like, okay, I'm done. I finished what I'm going to finish. Assignment submitted. I'm going home.
Yeah. Good for you. Is it comfortable, library? Like a really nice, sort of aesthetically pleasing, nice library to be in?
Yeah, all the floors are like different vibes too, so you can pick your vibe. I like the first floor of Moody Library. It's open, it has like giant windows, and there's like different types of seating, like not just a regular desk and table. They have some that are like comfier. Yeah.
Awesome.
But there's also like little study rooms on the second floor if you need to like shut yourself in and like really lock in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I went into one of those little, really lock-in little comfy rooms, I'd never leave.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard because like time just doesn't exist in there when you're just in a box.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it can be nice.
Well, how are you, Andrew? Oh, he's not here. So it's just Taylor and I this episode. Andrew is, what shall we say? Andrew is on assignment.
Yeah. He's busy.
Yes, he's what are those reporters that are in the field, you know?
On assignment?
I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to make a joke. It's not happening. But anyway, Andrew's not here.
A travel reporter?
Yes. So, we wish Andrew well. Actually, I don't think you're going to be here the next episode.
Yeah.
And it will be Andrew. So we will miss you. So anyway, It's that time of year, folks.
It is. I think exactly a year ago was when we were missing Andrew, when we did the like existentialism one. I think transcendentalism and existentialism back to back about this time of year.
Yeah, we had a good time. I actually vividly remember when that was. That was actually in June because he went on that trip to Spain and Italy with his buddies.
Yeah.
And that would only happen in summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm sour about it.
I would love to go do that. He's always doing cool things.
He is always doing cool things. He's like so mysterious about it too.
He'll be like, I'm going somewhere. I'm going to be out of town. And then he's just gone.
He's gone. I'm like, where are you going? He's like, Spain.
Away.
I'm like, what? Spain.
He's
Oh man, that guy.
oh, so silly.
Well, I'm doing fine. Like you, it's the end of the year, although my types of pressures are a little different than yours, but pressures nonetheless. But anyway, the end of the yearly academic cycle is coming to a close. So I don't know. Everything at home's cool. So yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Well, we have a little news to bring up. There's not often philosophy news, but there's a little bit of news. So R.I.P. to Daniel Dennett, the great philosopher, American philosopher, who dealt a lot with religion, consciousness, biology, all that sort of good stuff. He just released a memoir last summer, and I've not read it yet, but it's been in my cart. But anyway, Daniel Dennett, a pretty good guy, I think. He's a good philosopher. You may not agree with all his views. Actually, I don't agree with almost anything he holds to be the case, but I think he does philosophy well, and he's a compelling and interesting figure to read. R.I.P. Daniel Dennett. Do you know Daniel Dennett? Not personally, but
yeah, I think we've talked about him a little bit. Like I know him by name.
Yeah.
But like not super in depth. I think you brought him up in class before.
Yeah, with consciousness probably,
Yeah,
or free will. Free will.
Yeah. I think we've watched a video of him before, like one of his.
Yes, he looks like Santa Claus. He has the long white beard and the little spectacle glasses.
Oh,
he's like your grandpa. Yeah, there's tons of videos actually of him out there on YouTube. So if anyone's interested, check him out. It's always a lot to do with consciousness or religion or free will or something of that nature. But I've just always appreciated his approach to philosophy. Anyway, Daniel Dennett, I do not remember what his new memoir was. I think it's something like I've Been Thinking. I think that's the title. Anyway, no doubt, I have not read it, but no doubt it'll be a good read. So anyway, there's that. And then, happy birthday last Monday to Immanuel Kant. Happy 300th birthday. Yes. Getting old, that old boy. So, here's to all the Germans with powdered wigs and big foreheads. Happy birthday, Immanuel Kant.
Oh, God.
Apologies to the Kantians out there.
He's an interesting guy.
Oh, for sure.
Some interesting thoughts. We just read something by him. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. I'm blanking.
Critique of Pure Reason, maybe?
No, I think his metaphysical.
Oh. What's the name of that? It's where it's categorical imperative, all that stuff.
Yes.
Metaphysical, blah. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's not
Metaphysics of morals.
The metaphysics of morals. Yes.
Thrilling.
Yeah. So you read it? Yep.
Most of it for my class.
What's your review? 1 to 5 stars?
Oh man, like maybe a 3. Readability is like a 1 star.
Kant's a difficult read. Yeah.
I like my philosophy to be like readable, and I kind of like when the philosophers are a little bit sassy. Like Mary Midgley, Iris Murdoch is kind of sassy. Anscombe is sassy.
Yeah. I don't. Kant's really not known for sassy.
No, and he's not very readable either. It's like you gotta sit down and like lock in and read every sentence like 3 times. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting ideas though. Like I like.
Oh, for sure. Oh, like he's so monumentally important. Yeah. For Western philosophy.
Human dignity and that sort of thing. Like how high of a value he puts on human dignity. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
Yeah. For me, John Locke's kind of the same. Like I don't enjoy reading him. Yeah. Like I don't just curl up on the couch with a cup of tea and my cat and read some John Locke. An essay on human understanding. So great.
Yeah.
But holy cow, like so important and influential for philosophy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the next, this episode is about religious experience, and Swifties across the world experienced one of those recently with the release of the Tortured Poets Department album and anthology. So if you are not interested in this, you can probably hit that 30-second fast forward button about 4 times. We're going to restrict ourselves to 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. But since Andrew's not here to roll his eyes at us, Taylor, What do you, we haven't even talked about this. Well, we talked briefly.
No, briefly.
We talked about like the day it came out. Anyway, it's been a week. What do you think?
Okay. For one, Andrew's going to listen to this and roll his eyes when he gets to this part. So
I can feel the rolling right now. It's palpable.
Yeah, I can feel his response. The
palpable. Anyway, continue.
Palpable. Yeah. I quite like it. I don't know. I really like it. I think it's like fun and kind of different from what she's done before. And I feel like some of the songs are like catchy once you get them stuck in your head. Like you have to listen to them because they're not like pops radio singles. But I really like them. I like the Tortured Poets Department like title track. And she talks.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
You left your typewriter at my apartment. Who uses
typewriters anyway? Yes.
So funny. I love Black Dog. That song is so good. Guilty as Sin is good.
It's one of my favorites.
I don't know if you've seen the edits of like Post Malone dancing to the song. Like he's dancing on stage and it has Guilty as Sin overlaid it.
Oh, that's funny.
It's so
No. That's a great song. It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, so here's my process. I've only focused on the first album.
Ooh.
I've listened to the second album once. So, like you said, it takes multiple listens, right? So,
yeah,
I've really like dove deeply the last week into this first album. So, I like it. It did have to grow on me, but I like it. There's some skips for me on that first album still right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're right. It's not like banger pop songs or whatever. They take multiple listens. But yeah, I like you, Tortured Poets Department. I like Down Bad.
Yeah, that one's
But Daddy I Love Him.
Oh, that was my favorite the first time through.
That was very well. Right now, my favorite is Guilty as Sin. I keep listening to that over and over.
I
do like that one.
They're so catchy. So
they're
Long
catchy.
London is good.
Which one?
So Long London.
I like the opening. It sounds like a boys' choir. Yeah. Well, to keep this philosophical, the song "So High School."
Yeah.
Aristotle's used in the chorus.
That's true.
So there's your philosophy tie-in for Taylor Swift.
LOML is good. The like Love of My Life, Loss of My Life song. That one's good.
Yeah, there's some good ones there. So
I'm Gonna Get You Back. That might be like my favorite right now. It's on the second.
Is that on the second one? Okay,
yeah
I don't recognize that title. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good.
I'll look forward to it. I've heard The Prophecy is also very good.
Yeah, that one's good. Cassandra references the character from, is it the Odyssey?
Oh,
Yeah. The prophetess. I Look in People's Windows has that like connection to Death by a Thousand Cuts where she says, I look through the windows of this love even though we boarded them up. It's talking about like looking for her ex everywhere, like seeing, like wanting to keep tabs on him, but discreetly.
I've heard that title mentioned a number of times. That's on the second album, I think. Yeah. All right. Well, we will have more to say. Maybe not on this podcast, but with each other. But that's all we will do for this.
Yep.
Well, let's get on to this religious experience. Here we go. All right, so in this episode, we're going to shift gears from what we did with our previous episode, which is we talked a lot about types of religious experience. In this episode, we're going to talk a bit about meaning and language. In other words, when we or someone has a religious experience, especially if it's a private experience, if they want to tell someone about it, they have to use language. So, if you've listened to our podcast enough, you know that we've talked frequently about analytical philosophy and the importance of language and express how language expresses truth and things like that. So, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of verification or verifiability. You might ask, like, when is it important that verifying a religious experience, when does that become important? Because, some people might be like, well, just who cares if someone had a religious experience? Good for them, But verifiability, the question is, how do you go about doing that? And that has something to do with religious language as well. But anyway, that's kind of what we're going to talk about this particular episode. So Taylor, before we get going, talking about all these religious experiences, I thought last time we recorded, I really wanted to ask this question, and we didn't. So Andrew's getting off the hook here, but you and I and Andrew, all three, at least grew up in religious traditions. You and Andrew are still very involved in your religious traditions. I would call myself, spiritually adjacent. Have you ever experienced a religious experience?
I would say yes, not in like the form of miracles or anything like super crazy, but especially at like the church I go to now, they stress like praying and then listening to God's voice and like hearing what he has to say about different things. So I've heard in that way of like, I don't know, just like comfort, and then like different scriptures where I'll be like praying and then hear, okay, go to the scripture, and then like turning to it, and it'll be like a scripture that I don't know, but it is like irrelevant to whatever I was praying about. So things in that way of like just hearing God's voice.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. So hearing God's voice, does that mean like hearing God's voice, like you're hearing my voice right now? Or is that like you're kind of led by something, but not like a direct voice? Yeah. What do you mean? What does that mean for you? I
guess it kind of depends, but hearing it in my head, not like out loud, like not if someone played something over like a speaker.
Oh, sure. I guess that makes sense. So like imagine like my voice in your head though. Is that?
Yeah. More like that.
Okay. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And led to these particular verses. Is that, is that a, pardon my ignorance, is that a, like we're just thumbing through the Bible and we open it up and there it is? Or is it like, hey, you need to look up Luke 3:15 or whatever?
Yeah, like a specific verse. It's like, go to Isaiah 45, verse 8 or something.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. But I know different churches have like different opinions on like if you're just flipping through the Bible and like stopping on a random page. Some are like, it's just coincidence. Like, don't put a lot of stock in that because there are like lots of not random things in the Bible, but like different allegories that are used. It's like, you might not want to like literally do whatever it shows on that page, and some might say like that could be relevant.
That's interesting. It reminds me of a Catholic practice actually called Lectio Divina, which is you just open the Bible and whatever verse you see, that's what you deal with, and you try to you reflect on that verse, you interpret that verse, you see maybe like what kind of the application is to your life, but it's a total like just open the book and see what's there. And there's some belief that, you're meant to open that particular verse or whatever.
Yeah. Sometimes if I like don't know what to read in my Bible, I'll just open it to a random page and be like, I'll just read whatever.
Oh, I hope you don't end up in Numbers. Good grief.
No.
What a dry book. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for the Numbers stands out there.
But like Psalms and Proverbs and Isaiah they're all pretty hardy.
Yeah.
And then like the New Testament has lots of good stuff.
Yeah. You ever accidentally ended up in like Habakkuk or something? One of those minor prophets.
No. I'm so curious because it's like 3 pages. It's like small enough that like once you get back in the New Testament, there's like whole books that you can just flip past and not even mean to.
Yeah.
I kind of forget about
the John epistles are very short.
What is this?
I think John 1, 2, and 3 are very short. But anyway.
Okay, Mr. Parsons, what about you? Have you ever had a religious experience?
So this is really interesting for me. I don't think I have. And I've thought about this a lot. I'm still I don't know if religious is the right word. I'm very aware of God and spirituality. So we're not like an every Sunday couple. But I was very involved in church as I was growing up. I always, at least in my tradition, baptism was a very special sort of event. I remember I was 13. I got baptized at camp. If anyone's ever been to summer camp, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I don't know, like I would like to think I was moved by God to do this, but I also like know that camp is a fun time with lots of people, and lots of people are getting baptized. And, little old Parsons who just wasn't as cool as some other kids would also, be like, oh, I'd get a little attention out of this. I don't think completely that was what was involved in it, but to be honest, that was some of it. And when I was baptized, I was thinking like I would experience something. I don't know what that something was, but like a feeling. I don't know. I thought I experienced something, and I don't know that I did. I don't think I did. I think I felt neat and special, but
yeah.
And so, and I've never, had an experience like you've mentioned with God speaking words too. Even though I prayed and read the Bible a whole lot when I was young in my teenage years, and so I don't know that I've had one. At least according to the definitions we talked about in our previous episode, I have, I think, like been in some really cool places in nature. I've hiked to a couple of tops of mountains. I've hiked through the Grand Canyon. I've seen some beautiful places. And I do get a sense of like, oh gosh, there's something so much bigger than me. I don't know if you call that a religious experience. I've heard it read that some people call that a numinous experience. But anyway, I think that's the closest I've ever come. And I got to be honest, I'm kind of disappointed. I'm kind of disappointed. Yeah. So I think that's interesting, So with religious experience, I have some questions, about like, so is desire a part of that, That, like, what triggers one of these things,
Yeah.
Is there some level of devoutness that maybe I've never achieved? I never reached that level or something, But then I think about Paul when he was Saul on the road to Damascus. Like, apparently he was a pretty bad guy.
Yeah.
It was like
the worst of the worst.
Yeah, it was like hunting. Well, hunting's the right word, but it was like more or less hunting Christians, right? For the Roman Empire. And like he got a religious experience. Am I not bad enough?
Yeah.
I gotta be. Am I not good enough and not bad enough? Am I too lukewarm? Anyway, I think about those things. I'm just like those fascinate me when it comes to those types of questions. Fascinate me with religious experience. Sorry, that was a long bit. Thanks for listening, everyone.
You bring up church camp, and I feel like that's so interesting too, because I think you're very right in that so many people get caught up in the like campiness of it all, of like, oh my gosh, we're so excited and we're doing this and we're doing that and like this is what we're doing, and like, which is great, but also like I think that experience is probably not unique. Like, you're definitely not alone in that. A lot of people just like going through because they do feel moved in the moment, but then after being like, I don't know how much of that was like a religious experience or like connection with God versus like getting so caught up in the camp of it all.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's validating. I remember, I remember some at camp was like, I feel led by God to ask out this girl that's really cute. That's part of camp too, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to sit by so-and-so because when there's a prayer, we'll all hold hands. This is real.
That is so Christian summer camp.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And they're like, I feel called. Like, God just highlighted me to you. Not that God can't or won't do that, but also like, I've definitely known the Christian teenage boys to pull that. God said. Did God say that to you?
Oh, that's so great. That's so great. It's like, please let this be a really meaningful prayer where we all hug afterwards. That's classic. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like, who am I going to partner with for this game?
Oh, yeah. Got some kickball coming up. Whatever else we did at camp. I mostly remember kickball. Well, okay. I don't know how to tie that in with what we're going to talk about this episode, but I feel like it's important. Like, it's direct experience, right? Yeah. That's one of the things about religious experiences. It's a direct experience, and it's oftentimes, unless it's a miracle that other people are witnessing, it's almost exclusively private. And so, like, if you say, you hear the voice of God in your head speak to you regarding verifiability, I can't do that. No one can do that. Right. And so that does, from a philosophical perspective, and we're talking about religious experience, that brings up some interesting aspects about verifiability. Yeah. I don't know. Any thoughts on verification before we get into these boring analytical philosophers?
I think verification is interesting in terms of religious experiences, because in some way they are so personal, and how can you like put that to the test of scrutiny? I know as far as hearing like, oh, God said this to me, a lot of what my church leaders will talk about is like you've like testing that with what the Bible says of does this match up with what we know to be true about God's character?
Yeah, some coherence, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like God's not going to tell you something that contradicts his character, being good and leading us in this way and wanting us to prosper and that sort of thing. And not just automatically being like, yep, this, I heard this in my head. It must be exactly true, must be the voice of God. But like, I don't know how you exactly for sure would discern that.
That's good. I can't remember how many episodes ago. I'm not even going to try. We spent some time with a group of philosophers called the Vienna Circle. And then by extension, some British philosophers, or English, however technical you want to get there, A.J. Ayer, Wittgenstein, Bertrand Russell, by extension held some very similar views. So I just want to review those for those who are unfamiliar. The Vienna Circle, geez, guess where these guys were from? Vienna. And so Vienna, Austria. Just after World War I, leading up to World War II. It's a group of philosophers, largely Jewish, and that's not important, but it's kind of interesting in that Vienna was a center of, Vienna at the time was really a center of like intellectual excellence. Like it was kind of an epicenter. You know, many great philosophers and thinkers were in Vienna at this time. Anyway, sidebar. So the Vienna Circle came up with what's today referred to as logical positivism. And I can't remember who exactly coined that term, if that was Vienna Circle members or if that was A.J. Ayer or whatever. But so let's just talk briefly about what that means. So with proving, for lack of a better term, determining the truth of a statement. So there was a real linguistic shift in philosophy at this time. In the 19th century, so romantic, you know. You had Nietzsche and Marx, and everyone was just, so emotion-filled. The Vienna Circle came along. It's like, we got to rein this metaphysical business in and really only talk about things that we can truly talk about. And those are things that are empirically verifiable, according to them, right? So it's this whole notion of the importance of empirical evidence as a foundation of knowledge. When we say, how can we know what we know? It has to be, according to them, based on empirical evidence, right? Observation, experience, and statements could, if those could not be empirically verified, they were considered meaningless or devoid of any sort of cognitive content. So to use an example, if I said, God exists, that's not something that's empirically verifiable. So the logical positivists called that a meaningless statement. It's not a statement that's devoid of importance, but because it's not empirically verifiable, they said it was meaningless. And so anything that was like anything dealing with ethics, with religion, with art and aesthetics, anything like that just was tossed to the wayside with the Vienna Circle because of this emphasis on empiricism. Anyway, thoughts on that?
That's interesting. And I think we're still seeing the kind of fallout or like impacts of that.
We certainly are.
With how aesthetics and beauty are still kind of like the least valued of divisions of philosophy, that like epistemology is very highly regarded. And then as you kind of branch down the line, aesthetics and beauty get kind of left behind because there isn't that sort of verifiability, and it's more about personal experience, and those are almost taken less seriously than epistemological arguments.
Yeah, I think it's still very much with us today. The logical positivist, their movement really kind of faded out after World War II. I mean, there's still some value to it, but the passion for it, the intensity of it, faded out after World War II. And this is why we see something like virtue ethics make for lack of a better term, a comeback at post World War II, because it seemed like logical positivism just didn't allow enough for the importance of like moral and ethical decision making. And we saw in World War II lots of moral and ethical decision making based on the idea. Anyway, so virtue ethics makes a comeback. But yeah, you're right, Taylor. I think it's still very much with us today, and a lot of universities across the United States and Britain are still heavily analytical. Analytical doesn't always equate logical positivism, but that heavy influence is still there, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, where you'll get whole classes on epistemology and metaphysics, but you're more hard-pressed to find a class on aesthetics and beauty.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, at least thinking about like the Baylor course catalog, they definitely offer epistemology classes and a whole class on metaphysics, at least one. But I don't know that they regularly offer an aesthetics and beauty class.
And there's a couple other branches of philosophy like pragmatism that just doesn't get any play at universities because it's not analytical. Anyway, I just think that's interesting. And continental philosophy, frankly, just doesn't get a lot of attention. There's always got to be like an existentialism course because everyone's interested in that, it seems like. But outside of that, there's really not a lot of courses on Hegel or Schopenhauer or a lot of those. Yeah. So one other thing I want to bring up about logical positivism, there's a lot we could say about it, but I want to talk about the coherence theory of truth. This states that the truth of a proposition is determined by its relationship to other propositions, not by its correspondence with empirical phenomenon. The reason I'm bringing this up, I hope everyone will see when we get to determining whether or not religious experiences can be verifiable, is there should be, or one of the things we can look for some type of evidence is a coherence of factors that aren't necessarily empirical, but they harmonize with each other. So let me give an example, and then let's see what you think, Taylor. So historical narratives. Let's use history for an example, because history is really one of those very interesting combinations of attempting to be empirical, but like you can't escape the subjectivism of human beings who are reporting what we're talking about. So historical narratives, when we're trying to determine if something is historically true, outside of something like Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC or something like that.
Yeah.
Historical narratives, we say here, can be evaluated based on their coherence, right? So the way that they harmonize with each other. So suppose a historian presents a comprehensive account of a historical event that incorporates various primary sources, eyewitness testimonies, and documents. And if you've taken any history classes, those are like the big three in determining something that's a historical event. If the historian's narrative is consistent with these sources and doesn't contain really any contradictions, then it's considered more likely to be true within the framework of historical scholarship. So there's a coherence between all of these factors and what the historian is claiming to be true that gets us closer to what logical positivists might be happy with, because at least a degree of it's based on empirical evidence.
That makes sense to me, especially in the context of history. If you have all of these varying sources that odds are not everything in them is objectively true because it is filtered through the lens of human experience. And then if it's some sort of testimony, it's in the context of whatever happened and how they're remembering it and how long it's been. But it does make sense. Like if all of these different sources are saying the same thing and you can kind of piece a through line together, that it is more likely to be true, and you can kind of find the underlying, like we know that this is what happened at the most basic level. That makes sense.
Yeah, and so that's the type of justification we're left with religious experiences, because religious experiences, again, unless they're like miracles that other people observe, but religious experiences just simply aren't empirically observable. And so we have to rely on some other types of evidence. But like you said, with logical positivism still being with us, and I'm not saying this is wrong by any means, when we're looking for justification or to identify something as being true, we say things like, well, let's go to the data, or let's go to the numbers, or whatever. And these are, of course, empirically or quantitatively derived from whatever's going on. And of course, that's really important. Like we can't make informed decisions about things like climate science or climate change without climate science, which is all done empirically. And so those are important, but we also know that there are many things about human existence that just aren't purely empirically observable.
Yeah.
Can we think of something else that's not empirically observable but are like fundamental to human existence?
Relationships, or like how you feel about another person, love.
Okay, say more.
You can do acts out of love, and like there's things that we can do to show that we love each other. Like if you see, I don't know, like buying somebody flowers, like you're just at the grocery store and you see flowers and you're like, oh, they would like this.
Mm-hmm.
That shows that you know them and you care about them and that you have some sort of love for them, generally, like based on convention. That can't necessarily prove that you love them. It's just like the same thing. Like it's lining up of like you're doing these things that usually equate to like you love them, but there's no way to prove that you do have that sentiment or that feeling.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, whether it's romantic love or friendship or something like that, we do have these outward acts, like you said, buying flowers, holding hands, watching movies together. I don't know. Sharing a bucket of popcorn at the theater, and not worrying about your germs. All of these, are outward expressions that we would associate with relationships. But yeah, we can never penetrate like the other person's mind, find out if they truly love you.
Yeah.
So we have to make a bit of a leap, right?
A leap of faith.
Leap of faith. I don't know that it's a huge leap. Like, hopefully enough evidence stacks up and you're like, oh yeah, this person must love me, clearly.
Yeah. It's like a little step.
And, there's other little things that we call like red flags, right? Oh, they're doing this. Well, it makes me wonder, if there's enough evidence.
Or yellow flags.
Oh, tell me about that. I'm not familiar with yellow flags.
Well, so like red flags are things that it's stop, turn around and run.
Oh, okay,
like inherently
Yeah.
Like not trying to the wait staff. But yellow flags is like, why can't I think of anything? Like if they're forgetful. I feel like that could be a yellow flag of like, this doesn't mean that something is wrong here, but like it's a sign of what if they're like, there could be.
Yeah, like if they forget your 1 week anniversary and you're like, oh, yeah. Okay, a little worried, but then 1 month comes around. Will they remember it or not? So, if they don't remember it, well, that yellow flag turns orange or something. I don't know. Now I'm thinking of like, when you go to the beach and they have all the wind advisory flags of the different colors.
Yeah. I feel like it can be kind of like that, not to get too on a sidetrack, but like I feel like there's things that people can do that are like, that's not that big of a deal. Like it could be evidence of something worse in the future, but like that on its own, fine. Yeah. But then there's things that literally turn around and run. That is danger. That's like a tornado warning sign.
Yeah. High waves, big undertow, don't enter the water, red flag.
Yeah, the double red flag.
Oh, man.
Jellyfish. Don't get in the water.
Don't get in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess if you take, enough of these yellow flags, you're like, okay, well, this coheres to an interpretation where we can think like, okay, well, even though I can't ever truly know, it seems like based on all this evidence that, there could be some problems with that evidence. We don't know. But with enough of that, we'd say like, okay, it coheres to a particular viewpoint. And we would have enough of that for us to feel justified to taking an action of some sort. Okay. Look at our relationship advice podcast. All right. Okay.
The new ODP.
The new ODP. Yes. Those will come out every other Tuesday. Anyway, just kidding.
ODR, open door.
Relationship. Oh, wait, that sounds weird.
Wait. No.
We should just have an advice column, Taylor.
That would be so
advice podcast. Lead everyone astray.
You give good advice.
Oh, gee.
Philosophical advice.
Shucks. Thanks. It's because I'm old. There's my old comment for the podcast. Okay. A couple philosophers I want to talk about in terms of justifying religious experience. Okay. So here we go. We've talked about the logical positivists and their naysayers. So let's talk about how we can possibly justify religious experience. W.J. Wainwright has this idea. I don't even know what to call the idea, so I'll just explain it. So he says, and actually the three philosophers I'm going to talk about kind of say the same thing, which is belief in God based on personal encounter can be just as legitimate as some type of intellectual reasoning of believing in God's existence or religious experience. Just like William James, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, he points out that religious experiences from different traditions and cultures do share common characteristics, despite the fact that their diverse culture and historical contexts exist. So that is kind of in and of itself interesting. But he talks about trees. Let's talk about these perceptual objects, talk about a tree. So Wainwright says, I experience a tree, I believe a tree exists. And I don't think anyone really argue with that, right? However you experience that tree, you see it, you smell it, you feel it, whatever. I experience a tree, I believe a tree exists. He flips that. I experience God, I believe God exists. Now, this, of course, doesn't involve any sort of perceptual objects, but really, like what he asks here is are there really any differences? Not really. Are there any differences between the reliability of a religious experience and a sensory experience, right? So, here's a water bottle right here. I see my water bottle, I feel it, I smell it when I'm smelling a water bottle. And I'm like, I believe this water bottle exists. If I experience something like the voice of God or a vision or something like that, what's my grounds for not accepting that, even though it's not a sensory experience? Like, why would we not trust that? Is kind of the question. What do you think of that argument?
It's interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting argument, but I don't know that a physical sensory experience is exactly one-to-one with a religious experience.
Oh, no, it's really not, of course. But it's kind of like a question of trust, right?
Yeah.
And, we could say like, oh, well, okay, there's a religious experience that actually does involve us witnessing something.
Yeah.
I mean, let's pretend like we're Moses. Oh, look, there's a bush. It's burning. But it's not burning. How weird. And then a voice tells you, take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. That's if we were Moses in that situation, that is something we would be empirically observing. So why would we not trust that versus, something else? It is kind of the point of that argument.
I agree with him, but I don't know, like, if I disagreed with his conclusion, that I would be like, I don't know. I don't know if it's a convincing argument, but I do agree with his conclusion. Like, I've experienced God. I believe God exists. I don't know.
Let me add to the argument a little bit. So Richard Swinburne, if you've listened to any of our episodes on religion, you can't escape Richard Swinburne. So he has something called the principle of credulity. So this principle says, a principle of rationality that, in the absence of special considerations, if it seems epistemically to a subject that X is present, then probably X is present. What one seems to perceive is probably so. We actually brought this up briefly in the previous episode. So that's the principle of credulity. What does that say? Yeah, religious experiences similar to other perceptual experiences that are typically considered reliable unless proven otherwise. Now, Swinburne, actually all of these philosophers, Swinburne will point out that we should be still, with all of this, viewing religious experience with critical evaluation and scrutiny. This isn't John says that, yes, voice of God. Okay, we should just accept that. Like, there's still definitely an emphasis here on critical evaluation and scrutiny. But that's the principle of credulity. Let me offer a counter argument, and then let's discuss. So there's a counter argument to this that you might just call the negative principle of credulity, which is if it seems epistemically to someone that something is not the case, then it probably is not the case. So you just take what we've talked about and just flip it, right? So if we be like, if something is the case, then it probably is the case. Well, if something is not the case, then it probably is not the case as well. So philosopher Michael Martin says, gives an example of a chair. Philosophers love chairs and trees and tables and stuff.
They do.
They do. And mugs, coffee mugs. They love talking about coffee mugs. But anyway, he says this, in ordinary life, that an experience of a chair is good grounding for believing in a chair. Like, you experience a chair, yes, there is a chair. He says, so too the experience of the absence of a chair is good ground for believing that the chair is absent. In other words, you can say, my water bottle exists, but if you don't see a water bottle, there's plenty of good ground to say, actually, there's no water bottle. A water bottle doesn't exist. And so we get to this difficulty of, especially with belief in God, we all know, like the difficulty with God in justifying his existence is that it's not empirically verifiable. You kind of apply this to religious experiences like, okay, well, I can't observe. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. What do you think of all that, Taylor?
I feel like it doesn't go both ways because when you see a chair or a water bottle or whatever, you can say like, I have seen this thing so I can confirm or say with some certainty that it probably does exist. But just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I don't see my roommates right now, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist somewhere. Like just because you don't see a chair doesn't mean that there's no chairs. But maybe if you'd never heard of the concept of chair, like you never knew what a chair was to begin with, could you make an argument? But even still, just because it doesn't exist in your realm of consciousness or like realm of experience doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because I'm sure there's plenty of things that I haven't experienced or haven't come across that exist.
To play devil's advocate with your example of your roommates, even though you can't see them right now, you do believe they exist. But you have had evidence, empirical evidence of them before. Now, this is kind of like, an imaginary friend or something situation. You're like, oh, me and my roommate, and your parents are like, oh, we've never seen this. Like, does this person exist? It's like when you tell someone you're dating someone, but they've never met this mystery person. So there's a couple of examples I use for this. One is the idea of the core of the earth. Right. So, we all went through elementary school. We all remember the poster on the wall of the earth with like a pie cut out, and we see the crust and the mantle and the core. No one has ever observed the core. No one's ever observed the mantle. Yet we have this theory that we all believe in, that it is the case, right? Another example, although there's more and more evidence now, say like a country you've never traveled to. I've never been to China. I will probably never go to China. There seems to be a lot of evidence, right? Textbooks and the internet and all this sort of stuff that China exists, but I've never personally experienced China. So maybe that has something a little bit. So obviously China does exist. Yeah. Well, or does it? Anyway.
Obviously the earth is round.
I guess so.
Or is
it? Or is it?
Or like gravity. We've never, you can't literally see gravity, but it holds everything together. Like we do experience it, but not in a conscious way. And I think you can experience God in a similar way of depending on your religious tradition, like how you understand it, but God is holding everything together and working behind the scenes. And that's kind of how gravity works. And we just believe that scientists have found this force that holds everything together and holds the planets in alignment and keeps the earth spinning and rotating around the sun. We've never seen gravity. You can see what happens when there's gravity.
Yeah, this gets to this rational justification of concepts, right? This is exactly how Plato gets to the world of form. We'll never see the world of forms. There's this idea of a perfect form of justice, and we can arrive at that existing logically, by thinking about, justice and all that sort of stuff. And it's no surprise that Platonism became a religion as well, right? Because in a way, gravity, the concept and also the equation of it is not empirical. I mean, I can drop my water bottle and hit the ground, but the idea, right? The calculation, the formula that exists. That's why Pythagoras had a cult built around him as well, the Pythagoreans, that there were these shapes, triangles and circles, and we can't really see them in the real world, but we know that they exist through mathematics and things like that. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think it's interesting to talk about. Yeah.
And then Hume would say, well, we think that we know about gravity, but what if you dropped your pen and it went up?
Right.
With his skepticism.
Oh, Hume. Sure, if it happened 335 million times before, why not the next one? It doesn't work. Yeah. We need Hume. We need Hume in our life.
Yeah.
He calls us out on stuff. Okay, let me hit this last philosopher. Now we're going to talk about William James, who was a pragmatist, which we've done one or two episodes on pragmatism. We haven't hit it that heavily, but he believed that religious experiences existed. It's interesting that he did so. He's the father of American psychology, so he was also very scientifically minded. He also had a medical degree as well, but he's also very well known as a philosopher. So he was highly interested in religious experiences, in religion in its totality. You mentioned in the last episode, he delivered this lecture, the Gifford Lectures in Scotland. His 20-part lecture was on the varieties of religious experience. So it's an interesting read in that he's so scientific, but also he's talking about a topic which seems to defy science, at least empirical observation. All to say, so he approaches it from two directions. He wants to justify that religious experiences happen, but also at the same time, he wants to show that religious experiences are also meaningful for a person's life. And in that way, religious experiences, he's kind of like, it doesn't even really matter if religious experiences are real or not. If they're practical, if they make a person's life better, if it improves their happiness and their meaning, and then it's fine, Anyway. He says it provides a lot of insight into like the human psyche and human consciousness, which he was also very interested in. But I have I have three things that he used to try to legitimize a religious experience. So let me run through those real quick, Taylor, and then we'll talk about them. So one is personal testimony. Actually kind of similar to like coming up with historical information. Religious experiences said are real and significant for the individuals who undergo them. Like they don't question these. They are real and significant for them, regardless of whether they can be objectively verified. So the personal testimony of the person in and of itself is significant to lending legitimacy to it. Let's involve that with what he called transformative impact, which we see evidence of the religious experience leading to a profound change in this person's life or their view of life. So it's not just, oh, I heard the voice of God, and I move on with my life, but we see a transformation as a result of that. So it counts as a type of evidence, if that makes sense. And I have a quote to kind of go along with that. St. Thomas Aquinas had a religious experience near the end of his life. And one of his famous quotes is, "Everything that I have written seems like straw to me compared to those things that I have seen and have been revealed to me." So here's this guy, Aquinas, the philosophical giant of the Middle Ages, says, everything I've written up to this point is now just straw, like useless hay. And that's what we talk about when we talk about like transformative impact, right? And then the third thing he likes to use, William James, is common themes. So like Wainwright, he says there's a variety of religious experiences across cultures, traditions, historical periods. And these common themes and patterns in these experiences suggest that they reflect this type of universal aspect of human consciousness and spirituality. So some will say like, oh, well, this doesn't have anything to do with Christianity exclusively. This doesn't have anything to do with Hinduism exclusively. And yes, that's William James's point. He's trying to take all these religious experiences from different cultures, societies, historical periods, traditions, and show the commonalities between them all and how those point towards a type of universal aspect of religious experiences, which is another way of trying to legitimize it. We might use the same arguments if we're talking about morality and we want to come up with a universal moral that's true. We might say, oh, all societies view that murder is wrong. So that's regardless of traditions, cultures, historical periods. It universalizes that moral law. And so James kind of tries to do the same thing by universalizing religious experience, which lends legitimacy to it. That's a whole lot of information. Sorry. So anyway, what do you think of this particular method of trying to legitimize religious experience?
I think it does seem to go along with the like coherence model that someone has had this experience, they have a personal testimony of it. And I like the idea that even if, say, it's not true, it's kind of a coincidence that you had this religious experience, but it does still encourage you to be a better person, to be happier or more joyful or not take things for granted. I think that is still objectively good. Like if it's encouraging you to just go out and enjoy living a little bit more, that's great. Or if it like transforms you to view the world with more awe and wonder, I think that's still great. I like this common themes across cultures. There's something so human about our desire to engage with the divine. In a lot of ways, like so many people are longing for this interaction with a divine being, and so many people across time and space and culture have had experiences with the divine or think that they have. I think that that's really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels so human. Despite how different we are, we still long for such similar things.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I love that too. I think it's a really beautiful idea. A counter argument would be where you have some religions who make exclusive truth claims, like our religion is right, for lack of a better term. A Hindu says, Brahman said this to me, and a Jew says, Yahweh said this to me. And they're similar, like we're trying to universalize these things. It kind of breaks down the barrier, if you will, of like exclusive truth claims of religions. So that's kind of I don't know if that's a counter argument, but I just think that's interesting. How about that? I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the question is, but it is religious adherents across the world, and all religions report, these types of religious experiences. Let's get to some more counter arguments. We kind of got to go quick. Apologies, everyone. The one counter argument is, hey, our experience might actually be deceptive. We all know that our senses can produce wrong things from time to time. But of course, that's empiricism. Yeah. But we also know our particular brain states can create false impressions, right? So that's one counter argument. Another is a religious experience might be influenced by some type of psychological event. Again, that goes back to brain states. But also kind of like what I talked about with my camp experience, social pressures. You might kind of, for lack of a better term, talk yourself into thinking that you've had a religious experience. But we also do this with other things too. We talk ourselves into believing all kinds of things, especially from social pressures, like we want to be this particular way or whatever. So that's another one. Another, and I don't know how strong a counter argument this is, but there's no real like agreed upon tests for verifying. And also although there's lots of similarities, there's not necessarily a one religious experience that everyone across the globe has. There's a variety, like William James has, of religious experiences. So there is some uniformity, but in broad categories. So there's that kind of argument. Gosh, these other topics we have is just a whole nother episode. So some other questions I had was, does religious experience, can that count as proof of God? And that has a little bit of what we've talked about today. Man, the idea of justification of belief is much bigger than just talking about religious experience. Belief is a huge topic for all kinds of things. And also there's a real interesting topic that we could talk about related to authority. So like, okay, cool. God spoke to you and said whatever. Does that mean we now should listen to you? Not you, Taylor, but the person who claims to have heard the voice of God. And so there's an issue of authority there as well. And do particular types of religious experiences lend more authority than others, and questions like that. But questions for another time. Any I don't know, any brief thoughts on any of those counter arguments?
On counter arguments, it's interesting. Like we can't verify it. Yeah. But I don't think that necessarily counts it out. Like we can't prove it, but we also can't prove that it doesn't exist either. We're kind of stuck in this. People have this experience. Like we can say that that's true. People have attested to it, but we can't say for sure empirically that, yep, this is true, or nope, this is not true. I don't know. I think that's interesting. And it does require some trust on the part of whoever's experienced it and then whoever's this is being told to. And it's interesting as justification for belief. I don't know. That would be interesting. Because I could see it as this is why I got, I don't know, like interested in religion or in, whatever spiritual practice. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew the other day was saying, like, I feel like all of our, like, we could just do a religion podcast.
Yeah, we probably could.
There's just so much there. I suppose you could do a podcast on any of these one things.
Yeah.
Any of these topics we talk about. Free will podcast or consciousness podcast or.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
could do.
When you mentioned trust, I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this with Swinburne, but with his principle of credulity, this whole idea of that in the absence of special considerations, if something seems to be the case, it's probably the case. He says, we should trust our experiences most of the time, a vast majority of the time. Our experience, whether that's metaphysically or empirically, our experiences are reliable for the most part. And because of that, and that's why it says, like, with the exception of like special circumstances, we should just trust that our report of that and other people's report of that, especially if it goes along with some of those other qualifiers, coherent qualifiers that we talked about. Well, okay, I think we did it.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no, I'm going to have to do,
good stuff.
I guess I'll have to do Andrew's part for the outro.
Yeah.
Oh man, such a hole in my heart, Andrew being gone.
Half of my heart. You know that John Mayer song? That's definitely not the melody of it.
It's a good song. Well, all right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We hope it was a great experience for you. But in all seriousness, we love that you listen. Thank you all so much.
Let us know your thoughts about this episode on Instagram at Open Door Philosophy or in our email at contact@opendoorphilosophy.com. Or if you want to let us know your thoughts on the Tortured Poets Department, you can also send that to our Instagram.
Yes, please.
Because I would like to hear them.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So,
yeah. Subscribe to our newsletter. It's in the homepage of our website, the episode description, and the link on our Instagram page. If you go to that little link and click it, it'll take you to the website. You can sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get cool emails from us. Once a month, we won't spam you, but you'll get a little email with some extra fun stuff. So
yes,
you should sign up.
We're so fun. Yes, extra fun stuff. Okay, what does Andrew say? He'll probably say something about YouTube.
Music.
I'll check out our YouTube channel. What does he say? Smash that subscribe button. Yes, Hulk, smash it.
Give us a like.
That's right. Give us a like. And then he would say something like our tagline, which is, remember, folks, when your life is needing some... well, maybe you probably wouldn't butcher it like I do. But remember, folks, when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. See y'all later.
Bye.